Hello and welcome to an Energy Connects discussion where we bring you the latest insights and analysis from the world of energy. I'm delighted to have sitting next to me today Isada Hiranwiwatkul, Senior Partner and Managing Director at Boston Consultant Group. Isada, such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And to start off, can you give us a quick overview about the global landscape for the energy industry and what does it look like going towards the future?
So if we look at the energy demand in Asia, in the past 2 decades or so, it has been growing roughly around 3% per year. We expect that growth is going to continue. The growth will be very different depending on the country, of course. Having that said, the mix of where the energy will come from in terms of the supply would need to change drastically if we were to meet the IEA net zero scenario. Right now, most of the energy source is coming from fossil fuel based. In the future, we need to have a lot more mix from renewable energy. And the pace of achieving that has to be a lot faster. So let me give you some example. In the 19th century, during the coal, it took about 50 years when coal market share was about 14% and grew to about 40%. 50 years. Then in the 20th century for oil adoption took about 35 years. We went to 14% to roughly 40% as well. If we were to meet the net zero transition, we need to achieve from 14% roughly today to 44% in 13 years. So that is a 3 times acceleration of what has to be done.
So that's a great point. And while the future looks bright for this diverse energy mix, what needs to be done to make this demand more sustainable?
I think there are 4 key building blocks that have to come together. And the future is not bright. Let me just make that clear. 4 key building blocks that have to come together are: 1 is technology, 2 is financing, because some of the greener and renewable alternatives are not necessarily cheaper than before. The 3rd one is we need regulatory framework to help push and steer the adoption of the renewable energy. And then lastly is around ecosystem, because you don't need to do things alone by ourselves anymore. So a list of partners that can help us. These 4 things have to happen. And I would argue technology for the most part is kind of there.
Okay.
Depending on the country, regulatory framework can be a bit clearer and a bit more forward-looking. We see some countries are a bit more progressive than the others. Of course, different countries have different contexts. In terms of the financing, this one is also a key concern from people who are thinking through additional investment to decarbonize their operations or to get into a renewable energy. So all those 4 things have to be in place in order to accelerate the adoption of the renewable energy. If you ask me right now, do I see the 4 things that can happen in the pace, the 3x the pace that I mentioned? I think it's going to be a stretch. It's going to be a hard push. But we need to keep going at it. Otherwise, it's going to be too late.
That's a fair point. And as we go ahead, and like you said, that various countries have adopted to their own pace in adapting to this change. And that's why you will often see that the discussion around energy transition is framed against, let's say, the energy trilemma.
Right.
And, where the equitable part comes up quite often. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So the energy trilemma talks about sustainability, security, and affordability, right? And with any transition or any transformation, if I'm running a business and I transform a business, I also have a bunch of constraints, right? How do I make sure that the operations is secure and is affordable, sustainable? We just need to get it done. If you ask different people, how would they optimize this trilemma, you will get different answers. But different answers are still better than no answers, and nothing is being done. So my advice to many of my clients is to all the transformation has constraints. Let's work through the constraint. Let's get it done, right? And then we learn from it, we adjust from it. But let's not use it as a reason to slow down and to pause the decision.
That's an excellent point. And just talking about that journey into the future of energy, what are your thoughts on hydrogen, especially looking at it from the demand side as well as the cost side?
Right. So, so hydrogen, specifically green hydrogen, right? To me, is quite important, right? An important element to achieve the net zero aspiration. Now, if you compare the cost of green hydrogen versus natural gas today, is 4 or 5 times more expensive. Blue hydrogen is about 2 times more expensive, give or take. Now, with the price difference, there's a demand, but it's hard for people to adopt in a fast pace. So then one will say, can I reduce the price by reducing the production cost and transportation cost? And the answer is, it's not so straightforward. We need to have an economies of scale. We cannot really transport green hydrogen easily seaborne, but if it's in the same country, it's in local area, then we can do through the pipeline. But then you get the issue of the small scale. Then it's not economical to do that. So there are some constraints on this one. I think a number of people are trying to break through on all of these constraints so that hydrogen can be a viable alternative source, and it's also affordable and economical as well. It may not be on par as natural gas, but at least will come closer so that people can make some trade-offs, and the adoption would be in a much faster way.
Looking across to that future where hydrogen across all its colors will be, a really factor to reckon with.
Right. Yeah.
Isada, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I'll be back with more Energy Connect discussions. Until then, stay tuned.